In this video, I'm covering the rook ending you see on the board. And here it's black to move. He's a pawn down, and he needs to activate his rook to the fullest, and also his king. So for the first move he plays is rook d8. Now the idea behind this is to get his rook to d2, and then activate his king with king g5, king f4, king f3, and attack the f2 pawn. Now white played rook a6, attacking the b6 pawn. Let's say if white tried to stop rook d2 by playing king e2, then would have a move like f4, and after rook b7, which attacks the b6 pawn, then black's king gets active with king f5, and after rook b6, now the whole point of king f5, f3. Because now there's no king e3 because of the checkmate, and he has to step away to e1. But now black goes rook g8. And now if white ignores this and plays a4, then black has rook g1, king d2, and now rook f1, attacking the f2 pawn. And with e and f pawn so far advanced, it's going to be hard to stop them. For example, if you go king e3, then he just plays rook e1, and whatever white does, rook e2 is next. And the f2 pawn is hanging. So let's say something like this happens. This hangs, and the a pawn is not quick enough, because after this you can just push, and a6, push again, and after king d2, rook f1 is next, and promotion comes with check. So instead of this, if king e1, rook g8, king f1 is necessary. And now black can simply repeat with rook d8, king e1, and rook g8. And that's it. So he chose to play rook a6, attacking the b6 pawn immediately and allowing black's rook to get to d2. And now the second phase of this ending is to get black's king active via g5 and f4. White took on b6, and now black doesn't defend passively. He just wants to make some counterplay on the f2 pawn. King e1 was played, and now rook c2. Unfortunately for white, he cannot kick this rook from the second rank because the f2 pawn is hanging. So let's say this, I would just simply capture and have two passed pawns on e4 and f5. So he's trying to stop this maneuver by attacking the f5 pawn. So king g4 was played, and now white tried to exchange the h pawn for the f pawn by giving up the h pawn. Now white took, and white took on f5, sorry. And now there's no danger of creating a passed pawn on in the center on the e file, but in return white abandoned his queenside pawns, and also black got the h pawn, the h passed pawn. Now black took on b2, rook f4 was played. For example, if a4 is played to run with the a pawn, then black just attacks it, and after a5, king g4, and after rook e5, king f3, and I guess that this is the position where white would have to repeat with rook f5, king g4. Because if he doesn't, then black can try to play rook a1, rook f1 and capture the f-pawn, which might not be the best idea. So let's say I play c4. Also, I can repeat like this. That's also an option. And then take on f2 if king gets too far from the pawn. So here he played rook f4, trying to cut the king off and also to attack the f4 pawn. But now black takes and the material gets too reduced. White takes on e4 and now the h-pawn. This h-pawn might become really dangerous, and it's a full compensation for a missing pawn. White goes c4, but now king attacks the f2 pawn, rook f4, and now rook c2. White's king is completely passive. A rook is overloaded, defending both c4 and f2 pawns, and now he plays rook h4 with the last trick. But Rubinstein doesn't fall for that trick. He plays king f3. The trick was if black captures on f2, then white had rook h2, exchanging rooks. But now the h-pawn is blocked by its own king. And if you try h4, then c5. Then this happens, unfortunately for black. And if he promotes, then queen c1 checkmate. Let me check that again. If king f2, h4, c5, h3, c6, king h1, king g3, or you can just play c7 immediately and after h2 to play king g3, and after king g1 promotion. And the only way to stop checkmate is to either promote to a knight or just to escape to f1, but it's also losing. So in this position, black doesn't take on f2, he plays king f3, which is very important. And now on king d1, he takes on f2 with the rook, and after c5, he just starts the chase on the c5 pawn. After rook h5, king d4 is played, and now black is going to play rook f6, rook c6, and capture this pawn. After which they agreed to a draw, and in this position you see how, in this game, you saw how important was rook activity. That even with the pawn down, if you have an active rook and an active king, you can manage to get a decent counterplay and compensation for a pawn. Thank you for watching and have a good day. Bye.